Hello everyone, I'm your IELTS tutor Jack, and welcome back to another episode of the IELTS Plus English podcast. I'm feeling really confident today because the topic is books. And as some of you may know, I consume a lot of books, particularly this year. I've changed my habits and I've been consuming a lot of books. So that's today's topic. Before we get into the questions, don't forget you can get the free handout for this podcast episode on my website at jacks-english.com. Or if you're Korean, you can go to my Naver Cafe, search for Yongguk Jack's English, and you'll find me there. Everything's available for free, whichever place you go to, so please make the most of that. As I said, we're doing books today. I'm going to do some part 1, part 2, and part 3. We'll do everything today. So let's start by warming up with some part 1. Question 1. Do you generally read a lot of books or do you prefer watching TV? I used to watch a lot of TV, particularly Netflix, but recently I've been reading more and more books, and as I read more, I watch less and less TV. I usually come home from work, make a cup of tea, sit on my sofa, and then read books there. So that's really taken over my habit of watching TV. I'm feeling like I really do need to warm up today, actually. That was not a very smooth answer, so hopefully I'm going to get better and better through this podcast. Okay, let's go to the next question, and this is also part 1. What kind of books do you like to read? I like to read a variety of books, but I particularly like fantasy fiction. So fantasy, when I talk about fantasy, I'm meaning things like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, these kind of new landscapes with strange types of creatures and magic. It helps me escape from my normal life, so that's the type of books I really like to read. Okay, a little bit better, a bit more concise. Now that I'm feeling a little warmed up, let's try a part 2. Now, as you know, part 2, we have a minute to prepare and 2 minutes to answer. As this is a podcast, I'm not going to take my 1 minute to prepare. As my regular listeners will know, I don't prepare any of these answers beforehand. They are freestyled, so please understand my answers won't necessarily be perfect, but I'm trying to put myself in the same position as you, the IELTS exam takers. So, let's get into part 2. Here is the question. Describe a book that you have read which you would like to read again. Very simple question. Now, I'm just going to set up my phone with the timer to put 2 minutes. As I said, I'm not going to prepare. We'll go straight into it. So what I'm thinking in my mind is the first book that comes into my mind, which in this case is The Hobbit. And I'm going to follow the structure which I use in my IELTS Plus Academy. I'll summarize that a little more later. So 2 minutes on the clock. Let's try our best. Starting now. I'd like to tell you about my favorite book, The Hobbit. I first came across this book about 15 years ago, so I was quite young. I was perhaps 14 or 15. My father recommended it to me and said it's a classic novel. I read it, and it was one of the first sort of more adult books that I managed to read cover to cover. It was amazing. It was a real page turner. And it really changed the way that I read books as well. It kind of gave me this new habit of reading because it was so exciting. Let me tell you a little more about The Hobbit. The Hobbit is about this creature called a hobbit who goes on this adventure to a mountain. So the whole book is basically following him on this adventurous quest where he goes to a mountain to defeat a dragon and rescue all of the treasure. So it's a pretty basic story. We've heard that in multiple other stories, but it's so well written. And it quickly became my favorite book. I can't say it's my favorite book now, but it's definitely in my top 10. And it leads on to another great book called The Lord of the Rings, which is another book that I've read a lot. It's also, I would say that it really changed my thinking about writing a story and kind of creative thinking. So it was quite an influential book for me. In the future, I hope to read more books like The Hobbit. So I'm always searching for more books from the same author or within the same genre. Oh, I did it again. 2 minutes, bang on. So let's just stop that there. I don't always get the timing perfect, but at the moment my time management is going well, so it makes me look better. So what can we learn from that? I was quite happy with that answer. It was a book that I'm very comfortable to talk about. So if you get this question, please don't be too creative, don't think too deeply. Go with a book that you're very comfortable with. And try to follow what I do, which is you start by talking about the past. So you can listen back to my answer. I talked about where I first came across the book. Then I talked about the present. I talked about the book itself, and then I transitioned to my opinions about the book. Finally, I talked about the future, saying how I would like to find more books like that. This is how I can manage my time to 2 minutes, because I know what I need to do in each section, what is required, how many seconds are required in each section. So for you IELTS takers, you have to do the same. Get a structure you're comfortable with and follow those times. You got to drill, you got to practice your answers until you're very comfortable managing your time. Okay, I will say no more about part 2, and let's just do one part 3 question. Let's go with this one. Do you think there is a difference between reading habits in the past and in the present day? Now, remember, before I start answering this question, when I talk about comparing the past to the present, I said in, I think it was the first or second episode, perhaps the second episode, you talk about technology or social media. Very useful. So here's my answer. I think there are a lot of differences between reading habits in the past and in the present. And one of the biggest differences we can see is the use of ebooks and ebook readers. For me personally, I started using an ebook reader this year. I got it a few months ago, and it totally transformed my reading habits and the way I consume books. A lot of people really like books, but they are not the most practical things when it comes to taking it on public transportation or lying in bed even. I like to lie in bed in the dark, so it's not great for reading a book. I could solve some of these problems by getting an ebook reader, which was really light, small, portable, and allowed me to read a lot more than I used to. So I would say the ebook reader is one of the biggest reasons that book reading habits have changed. Great. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode about books. I did. I always like to talk about books. Now let's see, next time we are talking about buildings. So I can't say this is a strong one for me, but I look forward to trying my best at that next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode. And as I said before, please check out www.jax-english.com or go to my Naver Cafe where you can search Yongguk Yongo Jax English, and you'll find me there, and you can get all of the free content that I provide. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. Bye bye.